If you're a competitor, fun is in the winning. You know what I mean? Nobody is having fun losing. So I feel like that's what he meant is we're losing. That's not fun. That's not fun for nobody. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that was the main thing, and people just took it out of proportion and blew it up and made it something that it wasn't.
When you're winning, that's the funnest. You know what I'm saying? The game feels the funnest to you. And at that moment, he probably hit a wall where if it didn't feel fun for him.
That's a little bit of my conversation yesterday with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase from Media Row. You can check out the entire conversation, of course, on YouTube. It's out there. Caroline, stunning honesty from the guys overall as we talked through that process. And my first question was about Joe and then about what's wrong in Cincinnati and just what the vibe is like in Cincinnati. And you could feel from the guys how frustrating it is. They talked openly about having to find the energy and having to find a way to pick everybody else up. And I think it's just a reminder of how broken. I mean, when I asked them how you keep a locker room together when the offense is so good and we all could see the defense is the problem, I mean, Jamar Chase kind of went, like, and it wasn't at the question, it was this process, right? Like, I think sometimes we forget when you're T and Jamar, and we talked a lot about this, you come from such winning programs. If you're Joe, you came from winning, a national championship, and then you get to the Bengals, and suddenly you're in the Super Bowl. Yeah. I don't know what's supposed to equip some of these guys for the process of figuring out how to go somewhere for work every day when you aren't winning.
I think there are multiple types of fan frustration or sports frustration, and one of those is when you're losing games and your team sucks. Yes, that's terrible because your team's losing games, but also there are tangible things that you can point to say, okay, our team can get better, and that's right. I think another type of frustration is what the Bengals are feeling and what Bengals fans are feeling, and that is, we should be good. We should be winning football games. We have an elite quarterback in his prime. We have one of the best wide receiver duos in the National Football League. We have had a quarterback playing at an MVP level, and we didn't even make the postseason. That is a level of frustration that is like you just keep banging your head against the wall and you can't break through. And like you mentioned it, T, Jamar, Joe, those are winners. Going back to college, they won. Early in their careers, they won. And so it has to be so frustrating to feel like you have all of these pieces and you just can't find ways to win.
It's frustrating for all of us because, to your point, I just looked it up. I want to remember, Joe Burrow's 29.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so when you talk about, I mean, Sam Darnold is 28, right? Mm-hmm. So we think so often about the age of quarterbacks and just the fact that, I don't want to say waste because obviously Burrow's already had so much success, but every year that they're not in the Super Bowl conversation, it just feels like they're wasted. And that's why
it feels like a waste.
The funny thing is, at least when you're constantly in the AFC Championship game and maybe things aren't breaking your way, I say, okay, you're right on the edge. You're on the precipice of something. The Bengals aren't that. Like every year in and year out for the last couple of years, it's roll the ball out, hope that, Joe can figure something out, and then huzzah, we're going to lose a bunch of games. It just doesn't make sense.
And whenever, listening to that clip and listening the entirety of your interview, which of course you can find on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page, check it out. When you hear that level of frustration, and look, you want that from your team. When you lose and you're pissed off, that's good. That's that competitive fire and edge. That's Zach Taylor's responsibility to make sure that that level of frustration doesn't bubble over into something that's negative. So it should be used as fuel. It shouldn't be used as this dark cloud that hangs around your locker room and kind of impedes your ability to win. We talked about that with the Buffalo Bills, that you start feeling it, right? When you consistently fall short in the AFC Championship game, when you consistently fall short in the postseason, and same thing, you feel like you have all of the pieces. You have an elite quarterback in his prime and you can't get to the promised land like that. You have to make sure that that doesn't start to damage your locker room, that you don't become necessarily a victim of your own success or a victim of your own mindset. I'm worried Zach Taylor doesn't do enough of that.
100%. And this all comes back to, talking to Jay Glazer yesterday, our question was who else do you think, you've got your eye on? And he mentioned Burrow as like Burrow and the possibility of a trade candidate. And it's funny because when we tried to really drill that down, didn't get any specifics on it. I get that we want to stack things together to make it feel like Joe Burrow's a trade candidate. I don't believe he is. When has, in the history of the NFL, when has a quarterback in his prime, like right in the thick of it, ever gone to a team and said, I want out now? Like, it's just not something. This isn't the NBA. It's a much different mindset. So we have certainly seen the Bengals have seen quarterbacks like Carson Palmer go in and say, "I want to trade." But you're talking about the current iteration of like this. The league's right now, Dan Marino, and as bad as things got for that and for Dan Marino, we just don't see it. So I think when people say, "Oh, they should trade Joe Burrow," A, I don't think that the Bengals ever would. B, you can't give anybody enough in return to actually, like, if you're making a chart, what do you ask for one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL? Like 5 years worth of full drafts. I want every single pick you got for the next 5 years. I would still say no to that. Like, if I had Patrick Mahomes, like if the Chiefs right now, if somebody called the Chiefs and said, "We will offer you every draft pick for the next 10 years," the answer to that would be no. I think that Joe Burrow is in the same category as Patrick Mahomes. So I don't believe that there's any scenario where he gets traded. And the only scenario people can find, Caroline, is one where he demands a trade. So then I go again back to, when is the last time we saw a top 5 quarterback in his prime demand a trade? It doesn't happen. I think there's a better chance that Joe Burrow just decides not to play football anymore than there is that he's going to walk away. And by the way, I don't think either of those things are going to happen. I think Joe is just going to suffer in Cincinnati for the foreseeable future.
I hope for Joe Burrow's sake that he would get traded, because he's playing for a franchise that has tried to find an offensive line, has tried to protect him, has tried to put some pieces around him. I do think the Bengals want to respect Joe Burrow and what he needs, but they're just not doing it. So I would love for Joe Burrow to go somewhere where he can actually win. And everybody has a price, of course, but the ultimate currency in the NFL is your quarterback. It's the most important position in sports. So yes, everybody has a price, but what price do you put on an elite quarterback, a certified winner? 7 first-round picks. 8 first-round picks. That's what we're talking about in the stratosphere of Joe Burrow. That's ridiculous. I don't think that the Bengals should take any sort of trade package in return for Joe Burrow. Because if they did trade Joe Burrow, what a deeply unserious football organization you would be. I mean, to have an elite quarterback in his prime and you say, "Man, we tried to keep him happy. We just couldn't." And you trade him away. That you may as well be telling your fans, "Hey, Cincinnati, we don't actually care about winning football games. Hey, Cincinnati, we don't actually care about our fans," because what you're doing is basically just pooping away your opportunity at winning games and being a relevant franchise.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I just pulled up his salary cap numbers, or where he is on his salary, and certainly he's got, looks like 4 years left on this deal. There's a potential out after 2027 if the Bengals wanted to get out of it. Again, they clearly don't. But all of that to say they've got him locked up right now under contract until he's 33. Not only do they have him locked up until he's 33, his cap hit number right now this year is $48 million, then $52 million, then $53 million, then $57 million.
That's a lot of millions.
That's a bargain compared to where I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see, like, when Lamar this year is, like, they're talking about $75 million. Like, when we look at the way the salary cap is rising, by the time we hit to 2029, a $57 million, mid-level starting quarterback is going to make $57 million. So I look at all that and say, so they've got him under contract until 2029, at which point in 2030, they can franchise. In 2031, they can franchise him. Like, I don't see a way that Joe Burrow, unless he retires, gets out of Cincinnati until he's 35 or 36 years old. The Bengals aren't going to say, "You know what, here, Joe, man, you're not happy. You're not feeling it here. We want you to be happy. We're going to send you somewhere that makes things easier." Like, at what point did the Bengals do that? Because then, to your point, how do they sell tickets? How do they convince anybody that they want to go to that stadium? What do they tell their fans? What's the loss in season ticket sales? What's the loss in jersey revenue? What's the loss in just perspective and the way that you're seen as a franchise? What free agent's ever going to want to play there? Who's going to want to be drafted there? All of these things. Like, you trade away Joe Burrow. That's why, to your point, I grew up with the $1 Million Man. Everybody's got a price. I don't believe when you have a top quarterback in the NFL, there is a price. And if I said today, what would it take to trade for Mahomes? What would it take to trade for Allen? What would it take to trade for any of those guys that are at that level? I think Bills fans would turn around and tell me I've lost my damn mind. I think that same math applies to Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Just because he doesn't have a Super Bowl, which is, the overstated portion of all of this, just because he doesn't have a Super Bowl doesn't mean that he isn't a Super Bowl winning quarterback to me. Like, Joe Burrow is the sort of guy that you get him, you're immediately, if you don't have your head up your ass as an organization, you are immediately a Super Bowl contender. The Bengals obviously can't figure it out. But my God, it would be the dumbest move we've seen in professional sports for them to trade Joe Burrow.
And I hear people screaming through their screens, well, he can demand a trade. Okay. So Joe Burrow, walks in to Duke Tobin's office, the general manager in Cincinnati, and he says, I want to trade. You know what I would say if I'm Duke Tobin? No. Done. Conversation over. Like, you can't demand trades in the NFL because Joe Burrow can say, okay, well, I'm not going to show up to practice, okay? That'll be a $50,000 fine every single day that you don't show up. And you could tell me, well, he's a cajillionaire. What's $50,000? $50,000 over a week is how much? 50 times 5?
$250,000.
Okay, so in a month,
math.
Look at you. Yeah. Math is hard. Numbers are hard. Over a month, that's $1 million. Over 2 months, that's $2 million. Like, those things start to add up. The way that the collective bargaining agreement is dictated and something that the NFLPA agreed to, those kind of holdouts, those kind of demands just don't really work in the NFL. And I also just don't think that's necessarily in Joe Burrow's demeanor to make everyone's life around him so miserable that they have to ship him out.
And I think there is some element of, okay, maybe Matthew Stafford being traded from the Lions becomes your great hope. Like, the Lions decided they were comfortable doing that. They got a haul and a quarterback in return. They also got a Super Bowl winning quarterback in return that they still felt like they could win with. And they sent Matthew Stafford somewhere because the organization and the quarterback had the relationship that they felt that was the right thing to do.
The ultimate win-win.
What indication do we have that that's at all the page that the Bengals are on, particularly right now? If you want to go even further into my territory as a kid, Joe Montana was traded from the 49ers to the Chiefs. And somebody will Google that and say, well, Joe Montana was traded. Yeah, because Steve Young was the backup quarterback. And what they were dealing with at the time was pressure from everybody trying to let Steve Young have his moment, which also he did. I mean, at some point, the times that the two examples I can think of in my lifetime where a truly star quarterback was traded involved Super Bowl winning quarterbacks that were then sent other places to allow other people to become Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. That equation is so rare, and it just doesn't feel to me like it applies with the way that the Bengals are currently constructed or the way that everything is going down. So obviously, because we love the drama, we'll keep talking about it. But if I had to bet all of our houses on anything, Joe Burrow ain't going anywhere.